right, welcome to another episode of the Vets and Real Estate Podcast. I am joined by no other than the Bo Barron, who will be joining us here talking about his time as a Marine and now is everything commercial real estate. Bo, thank you so much for being willing to join us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. This is
Yeah,
exciting.
I know we've been talking about this for a while, and honestly, some of your podcasts is part of the reason why I thought maybe I could do it. I was like, if Bo can do it, I may probably half as good as Bo. So we'll see where it goes, right? So
No, you're doing great. Yeah.
appreciate it. Tell me, what was it that you did while you're in the Marines?
Yeah. So I don't know how long of a story you want me to make of this, but I got tricked is the bottom line. Like I got duped into doing in the Marine Corps what I ended up doing. And the way it worked was when I went to the Marine Corps recruiter's office, I was failing out of college. I'd wasted 4 years. I had another year left. Didn't know anything about what I wanted to do in life. I just knew that I needed to be fixed. I was a complete mess. So I'd talked to the other recruiters and before I went in the Marine Corps office, and I walked in there and I looked at the recruiter and I said, look, talked to the Air Force and not interested for whatever reason, not wearing those Navy uniforms. So sorry to all you Navy guys, but didn't even walk in there, Talked to the Army. They promised me this, and this. I wonder what the Marine Corps has for me. Real arrogant. I was a punk. And that Marine recruiter looked at me and he said, man, we don't have bleep for you. I wonder if you've got the metal to be in my Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, okay. So right off the jump, this guy's pushing my buttons, And so I was like, man, I think I'd like to go in the reserves, finish college. He was like, didn't you just tell me that that you wanted a challenge, that you wanted to stop taking half measures? Like, what? Why reserves? If you're going to do it, man. You want to be half a Marine or, of course he was just trying to fill his quota probably, and nothing wrong with being in the Marine Corps Reserves. I think my son's about to enlist in the Marine Corps Reserves and I'm thrilled about it, But that made sense to me when he said it. I was like, okay. And he said, well, you have any idea of what you want to do? And I was like, not really. What are my options? So he grabs the MOS book and he's flipping through. He's like, I want to be a grunt. I was like, is that infantry? He's like, yeah. I was like, that doesn't sound like me. He said, well, are you mechanical? I was like, no, I'm the opposite of mechanical. He starts going electrician, all these other things. And I finally showed him my hands, and I was like, look, man, this right here are the softest hands you've ever seen. I've never done any real work in my life. The only good things that I have to bring to the table is I'm pretty good at thinking and I'm pretty good at speaking. And that's about all I have to offer. And so we go to the intel section of the MOS book, and I'm looking at these jobs. None of them really mean anything to me because they have titles I don't understand. But I'm looking at the signing bonuses next to them. And there was one that had $3,000. And all throughout the MOS book, I'm paying attention to these signing bonuses. And the biggest one out of anything was $3,000. Like it wasn't much. But to me, it sounded, might as well go with the biggest number. I was like, what's that right there? It was a cryptologic warfare linguist was the name of it. And dude looks at me and he goes, forget about that. You're not smart enough. And I was like, oh, man. Made me mad. I'm not used to people telling me I'm not smart enough, And so I was like, no, what? Tell me about that one. He's like, I'm serious. Forget about it. We've never had anybody qualify for that out of this office. Like, and it ain't going to be you. Like, forget about it. Which really made me mad. I was like, is there a test? He's like, yeah, there's a test. I was like, give me the dang test. Well, the test you have to take is the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, the D-Lab. Did you ever have to take this thing?
No, I knew guys that did, though.
This thing is nuts, and it has nothing to do with how intelligent you are. The only thing it reveals is how your brain works. And so they're looking for a brain that works a certain way because that's the way they teach languages, is a particular way. And you get it or you don't. It doesn't have a lot to do with your IQ or anything. And so I took this test, and it turns out my brain works that way. And so I ended up being a linguist in the Marine Corps. And so when I got out to language school, this was the next duping that I got. I walk in there, and among other things, in processing, this is all after boot camp and stuff, and they say, all right, you have 4 languages, and we want you to rank them, which ones you would prefer, and we'll consider that. That was the lie, though we'll consider that part. And so the 4 options were Spanish, Russian, Korean, and Arabic. And so I wrote them down. I was like, Spanish. My mom's fluent in Spanish. She majored in Spanish. So I've heard the language. I don't know it, but I've heard the language growing up. It at least sounds familiar to my ear. Russian sounded pretty interesting, But what I was really thinking about was Spanish was a 6-month school, and then I was out of there. Russian is a 9-month school. Korean was a 1.5-year school, and so was Arabic, 1.5 years. And so I ranked them that way: Spanish, Russian, Korean. Please, God, don't give me Arabic last. And of course, they gave me Arabic. And so that's kind of how I got duped into, I had a recruiter that told me that I wasn't smart enough and I had to prove him wrong. And then I had a command that said, yeah, we'll consider what you want. And of course, it was all needs of the Marine Corps. And I ended up with Arabic. So my last 3 years, it took me 2 years to get through the schooling. In my last 3 years, I was a linguist, and we were stealing communications from the bad guys, and they figured out pretty quick that I wasn't actually that good at the language. But I was 4 years older than everybody else, basically, because I'd wasted those 4 years in college before I went in, and so I ended up managing, linguists that were younger and a lot better at the language than me. But that's what I did in the Marine Corps.
So obviously that's speaking Arabic and doing real estate is just a little different.
A little bit.
How did you go from, translating communications and managing those, translating communication to working in commercial real estate?
Yeah, so it's all just because of who my family is. Like a lot of people in our industry, somebody or you had family in the business, and so. My dad and my granddad were in the business. So my granddad was a home builder, did that for a lot of years. My dad grew up working on the cruise, building houses, and he transitioned the business while he was running the show from, home building and then commercial development into brokerage. Because when my parents became Christians when I was a kid, they purposed to get out of debt, and it's hard to get out of debt when you're a developer. So they transitioned into brokerage, started working on getting out of debt. And so I grew up with a dad who was basically a broker. And I liked his lifestyle. Like, I liked how he was the boss, and he had a lot of freedom in how he spent his time. But my dad didn't really bring the business home. Like, he didn't talk about it when he came home. And, kind of left it at the office, and I appreciate that. There's a lot of good with that, but I didn't understand a whole lot about the business, and I wasn't interested, and I wasn't interested in my hometown. But I had this experience when I got to boot camp. I wonder if you had any kind of experience like this. I was messed up. I was in a bad way. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I'm trusting that they will fix me and straighten me out. I had those first couple days where the drill instructors are introducing you to a level of stress that I've never experienced before. And then that first Sunday on Paris Island, they tell us we can go to church. And they tell us that for an hour at church, there are no drill instructors yelling at you. I'm like, I'm in. Everybody went to church that day. And I'm sitting there in church. They start singing songs that we sang back at home. And I started weeping, man. I mean, like, I had this emotion flow out of me that I couldn't turn off for an hour. And I was embarrassed, and I was hoping nobody was, but I started looking around, and like, I was not the only one, And in that moment, a lot of things became pretty clear to me. One was that I wanted to go home when I got out. Like, I realized the importance of family, and I wanted to work with my dad in the business. Didn't really understand a lot about it, but and family just became so important. Like I realized it in that moment, and so it took me 5 years to get out and head back. But that's what I did. So I got out November 1st, 2004. Started with my dad November 2nd, 2004. The next week he had me in CI 101,
Hmm.
and I didn't even have a license yet. I knew nothing, and so right off the bat I was in my first CCIM course, and that's kind of how it started. But I got in the business just because I wanted to work with family, and that was the business that we were in, and I liked it, but didn't know much about it, and just turns out it worked out. Like I told my wife when we were getting out, I was like, hey, I love the idea of going home and working with Dad. I hope I like this thing, and I hope I'm good at it. I had no idea if those things were going to be true. I just liked the idea of it. So my dad was great at teaching me the business and showing me, and he's a man of character. I remember one of the first things I saw him do, he'd done a land assemblage deal for Walmart in town. And one of the contracts had some vague language that Walmart took advantage of, and that my dad and the rest of the people in the office kind of missed. And so these people basically didn't get about 50 grand. They thought they were going to get not a huge amount of money, but it was to them. And my dad appealed to Walmart to make it right. The contract wasn't clear. So I'm not suggesting Walmart was unethical or immoral in any way, but they were like, no, there's plenty of time to fix this if it needed to be fixed. And everybody signed off on it. We're not going to go back. And so one of the first things I ever saw my dad do was he refunded, like he gave his commission on the deal back to these folks to make it right. And I remember thinking, man, that's my last name that he's protecting. You know what I mean? And it was really clear at that point that I need to behave in such a way that honors God, honors my family, honors everybody else, because I need to protect this name that I've inherited, that I've benefited from every day of my life, especially in this town. And it was just, man, crystal clear to me right on the front end what it meant to do this business with integrity. And I saw my dad put his money where his mouth was,
That's got to be interesting that early on, where 50 grand is probably about what you're making in the Marine Corps a year, right? I
Oh,
mean,
it was less.
ballpark.
Like that was more than I made in a year, for sure.
And watching your dad write a check to somebody that he technically didn't owe, legally didn't owe, but felt ethically it was the right thing to do. That's got to be really kind of foundational that early in your commercial real estate career.
It was an indelible moment, like I've never forgot it. And it's kind of shaped the way I think about the business.
So as you go in, you've got the benefit of kind of having the family name, you've got kind of the family background. Was there ever a time that you think
Yeah.
you still had to struggle through kind
Oh, yeah.
of outshadowing granddad and dad?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of head games or head noise that I was dealing with.
Okay.
I had imposter syndrome. The first 2 years I was in the business, my dad was spooning me these opportunities.
Hmm.
You know what a spooner is, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like feeding a kid. You're just spoon feeding them. He
Mhm.
would do this. He would say, hey, look, my son's going to be the point man on this. We work together. We're a team, but he's going to be the point man, and he'd just be giving me opportunities. Back in my mind, I'm thinking, who would ever want to work with me if they could work with my dad? Like, what a downgrade from him to me, which was absolutely true at the time. I mean, he's still forgotten more than I'll probably ever know. So, there's a lot of that, kind of that imposter syndrome. There was my personality, I'm a researcher. And so once I've been through a situation once, I can go through that again with a lot of confidence. But the first time I lack confidence, I'm second guessing everything I do. And so, there's a lot of that. So yeah, there was a lot of the head noise that I kind of had to work through. But 8 years in, got to be pretty good at the brokerage thing, but I didn't love it. And I liked it okay, and I think I was pretty good at it. But uh, small town brokerage, like income swings are wildly different. And, I felt the weight of providing like consistent cash flow to the family. Like we could have a really good year, and I could bring home no dollars for 5, 6 months, and I felt the weight of that. And so 8 years in, I left the family business and I took a corporate job with SVN International. And so for a year, I was like their VP of organizational, whatever, I forget the title. And I never really knew what I was supposed to be doing, but I was gone for a year straight. Then I did 2 years in food safety technology because my wife suggested I get a new job because I was gone all the time and she felt like a single mom. So I worked with a buddy of mine in food safety tech because he had kind of a tech startup with a really cool patent, and I did that for a couple years. And I'd been coached by the Massimo Group, and I became a coach for the Massimo Group after that. So after those 2 years in food safety, I worked with Rod Santamassimo at the Massimo Group, was his COO for about 3 years. And that gets you to about 2018. And so I left the Massimo Group at that point and came back to the family business, started working with my dad. And at this point, it was, okay, how do we transition generations? So how do I buy him out? Took us about 3 years to figure out the best way to do that and kind of get my feet wet again. And so now I own the brokerage company. I don't do a lot of deals anymore, maybe just a couple a year. I'm just leading the company. I got a couple guys here that work with me, and the model is I want them to get 50% of their deals because they work here with us. And I want them to source 50% of their deals on their own prospecting efforts so that they understand, like, man, they're going to do better if they do it here. And so I just try to lead and support them. Then we've got a family portfolio that we manage. And then we've got, the podcast that we do, and I get to teach with you at the CCIM Institute. But the new thing, the thing we're real excited about is Hearthstone Capital, where we're a fund of a fund, and we raise, we're out there raising money all the time, and we're investing in other people's deals. And so that's sort of the ecosystem of our pretty small family business, really.
Yeah, that's a whole lot to unpack. Going back to Massimo and coaching, and then obviously working with Rob and all that, I'm assuming you likely coached and worked with veterans that are new to the business as well during that time, right?
I did, yeah. Yeah.
Did you notice anything, I guess, working with those veterans that either was a plus or even a hindrance that was kind of consistent?
Yeah, so I love working with vets, guys like us.
Yeah.
Like we know generally, you take the average vet, here's what they know. They know, or here's what we know, I should say. We know how to work as a team. We know how to sacrifice for the good of the team and the company. There's discipline there. I don't know if your experience was like mine, but man, I never learned more in a shorter period of time than those 13 weeks I was in boot camp. Like the Marine Corps was outstanding at teaching. And so, man, you take anybody that's been through that kind of environment, like they have the ability to learn and they know what it means to be led and to lead. So, man, you give me somebody with those qualities, most of the time, those are great experiences. Now, on the flip side, some of this can work against them. Like they can be too rigid. Like I remember coaching a guy, and the fluidity of the industry and the fact that we're working with people who may not have the same amount of discipline and propensity to sacrifice for the greater good of the team. And, sometimes this can be combative, the opposite of collaborative. Some people struggle in that environment. And so I saw some of that. And I even had this is a good buddy of mine, came and got out of the Navy, came to work with me, and it was a terrible experience. And what I found out was the structure that the military gave this particular individual allowed him to thrive in the Navy. But when he got out and he didn't have that structure, like he was a train wreck. And it was a terrible experience. And we had to part ways. And we're still good buddies. but I'd be lying if I said it didn't harm our relationship, at least some ways, you know. And so, yeah, those are some of the challenges, man. You go from military life to the civilian world. That's a stark contrast, and the ability to adjust and thrive in a much more fluid, you know, selfish. I'll tell you the biggest thing. What I fell in love with in the military was it was the first time that excellence was required. Like when I grew up, I did a lot of work to figure out how little work I could do and still get by. I mean,
Okay.
I did a lot of work, a lot of thinking to figure out how little work I could do. So I was trying to do the least amount just to not get in trouble, make good enough grades that I didn't get trouble when I got home. But I never gave maximum effort, ever, in anything. And the Marine Corps requires that. They require excellence, they require maximum effort. And I fell in love with that. Like the results of that, the satisfaction that you feel when you commit fully to something and give a maximum effort, like I fell in love with that. And so that has remained. But that's not the case for everybody. And it's hard, especially, you know, if you were to go, I feel like I'm just rambling here, but like if I didn't come back home when I got out and work with my dad, who also did things in an excellent way, man, I could have gotten disenfranchised like with the corporate world or something else. Like if I was put in a different situation, like I could really see how that would have worn on me and I just would have been a miserable person.
No, I can certainly see it, and I think the structure is certainly something we've seen as we've done a lot of these interviews. Is the moment you enlist, your career plan, at least how to promote, is for the most part laid out for you. I know what it takes to go from E1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and I mean there's some challenges, some schools, some things you've got to do, some politicking as you start getting to 6, 7, 8, to that level, but in real estate and in general, that's not the world we live in. And I think that's one of the things I think a lot of veterans do struggle with is when they do get out. All right, what do I do? Wait, nobody's telling me I have to get up. I don't have formation to show up to. Those kind of things are, and I know I was guilty of this kind of early on. Wait, I don't have to get up early in the morning and do PT. All right, and I'm still trying to work off those pounds 15 years later, realizing that lifestyle changed very quickly, and I've seen that over, and as we've had these interviews, we see the same thing over. It was that sometimes that lack of structure absolutely can destroy that productivity. And it takes a little bit to kind of figure it out and get it back. And those that do find success.
Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of the commercial real estate industry, whether it's brokerage or anything else. A lot of the jobs, a lot of the career paths here are 1099 type. You know, most brokers are independent contractors. That's not every job in the industry for sure, but you have a real opportunity to create your own structure based on what you're used to. And if you want to give maximum effort and do excellent work, nobody's stopping you and you'll be rewarded for it. And so if you've internalized the structure that the military kind of forces you into, like if you've internalized it and bought into it, made those convictions of work and all that kind of personal convictions, man, that'll really serve you in this industry. I mean, it is as merit based. Not that there's no politicking in who you know, because there's a lot of who you know in anything, and it certainly helps here. But it's incredibly merit based. I mean, it's absolutely, you close the deal, you get the check. You don't close the deal, you don't get the check. I mean, it's results based, merit based, and that's one of the things I love about this business. Nobody's telling you what you can make. Just go do it. And you want to figure out how to do it, figure out how to do it, and you can have all the success that you want.
I've got a buddy here in town that I kind of laugh at him because he's ungodly capable. He could do anything and everything he wants. 25 years or so in the Army. He got into real estate, spent the first 2 years building his business, doing all those things. Then all of a sudden he started getting things going and he just kind of stalled out. And from the outside looking in, I was like, dude, come on, you can get going. He's like, no, I'm doing what I want to do. Like, what are you talking about, dude? You could be doing three times production. You're only working 3 days a week. Like, you could be doing so much more. He goes, no, right now, I missed off on the first half of my kid's life because I was deployed for all that. Now, between retirement check and working, closing a dozen or two deals a year, I'm fine. I can work while the kids are in school. I get to come home and I pick them up. I do all those things. And then he's like, you know what? Wife needs a new car. He ramped up the brokerage for a little bit, turned around and made enough money, paid off the car, got it there, and is doing the same thing now. He's back in a work mode where he's like, we need a new house. So let me go ahead and go and bust rear for a little while and then go out there. He's going to buy a house and he's gonna relax back so he can spend time with the kids and realize that he's having that flexibility, which I don't know. For me, looking from the outside in, I was like, you're dropping your potential and realizing he's playing a completely different game, which is what I think is beautiful
Yeah.
about this is that
Nothing
he's
wrong with that.
which is what he wants. Yeah, it's what he wants to be. Is he wants to be dad and make enough money to support the family and ramp it up and down as need be.
Yeah. And like you can look at us as instructors and think the same thing. It's like, man, if they weren't off teaching a handful of weeks a year, they could get a lot more done back at the office and make a lot more money. And that's absolutely true.
Right,
It's like
you
we
listen to my
teach
wife
because we,
conversation.
but we teach because we love to teach.
Yeah,
Like we're doing what we want, you know?
yeah,
And when I block off from like December through March 15th, and I don't travel during those times and I don't teach and leave the office early on a lot of those days because it's my daughter's basketball season. I don't want to miss any of those games. That's how I want. I'm on purpose choosing what's the best use of my time. And that's not always based on, the bottom line or how many fees you can generate.
yeah. Well, you brought up the teaching side, so let's talk about that. I guess with CCIM, what did that process look like? Because you said literally day two of being in commercial real estate, your dad said you're doing it. So walk us through kind of what you did through CCIM and how you've kind of grown through that.
Yeah, so my dad is a designee, and I found out later on that my mom and my grandfather also took classes.
Oh, wow.
They didn't earn their designation, but they took classes. I didn't realize that till years later. But I knew about the CCM designation, when I was a teenager in high school because my dad was one of those guys, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. He sticks me in this class. Now, mind you, I told you before, about the only thing I have to offer is my ability to think and my ability to speak. And I'd never really taught anything at that point. But man, those instructors, and my first two instructors were Bill Moss and Bill Canty. And Bill Canty's passed away. But those guys were my one-on-one instructors. And I remember watching them teach that course thinking, these guys are awesome. This class is awesome. Learning this, I love to learn. So you put me in just about any learning environment, I'm going to enjoy myself. But this was next level. Like this was so interesting. It was explaining how things worked. It was like it opened up the world of commercial real estate to me. And I could see a real path forward to how I could actually succeed in this business. But man, watching those guys teach, I remember just thinking, way back in 2004, if I get to be one of them at some point in the future, like I would absolutely love that. And so, fast forward, they opened up for new instructors when I was with the Massimo Group. But at the time I was a W-2 and turns out I'm a terrible employee, by the way. I do not enjoy that. And I like to push back on a lot of things. And so not only do I not enjoy it, but people who work with me or might be my bosses don't always enjoy that either. Sorry, Rod. We're still great friends, but I think we're better friends now that we don't work together. But I didn't have the time freedom to pursue it. And so when I left the Massimo Group, I think it was October of 2018, they had just opened up taking applications for new instructors. And so the next day after I left the Massimo Group, I applied to be an instructor. And, I don't know if you want me to go through like what the process of becoming an instructor is, but
Sure.
you apply, and I don't know how many people applied. I think over 100 people applied. You have these phone interviews, and so Alec Pasella, who's a good friend now and a fantastic I think, multiple winner of the Instructor of the Year award. Awesome individual in Ohio. He calls me and he's my phone interview. But he was familiar with the Massimo group and he had seen some of the videos that we'd done with the Massimo group. So I was starting above zero with him because he was a little bit familiar with me, and interview went well enough, I guess, to where I was invited to your hometown of San Antonio to audition. And it was during I don't remember if it was the spring or the fall meetings, but
Spring.
went there, interviewed. That's where I met some of our friends now, like Kanisha. Met her then, and met a couple other guys during that process that are good buddies of mine. I don't even think they didn't end up making it through, but they're still good buddies. And I remember you had to do a 10-minute audition on some part of some curriculum. And I had chosen 102 as my course because when they asked me to choose which one I would pursue, that day I needed 102 stuff. Like in the business, like I needed the 102 stuff and I didn't really remember it. And I was like, well, I'll just go with that. So I chose market cycles, and I infused a lot of the presentation with self-storage data and stuff because, we had my dad started building self-storage facilities when I was probably 4 or 5. I kind of grew up in that business. And so it was home court for me. It's what I knew better than any other asset class. And so I was teaching market cycles in the context of self-storage. And I remember Richard Juge was on the panel. I didn't know him. I'd never seen him before. I was hoping I'd get a panel of a bunch of instructors that I was familiar with. Nope. I didn't know anybody on there. I think Jim Rosen was on there. Barbara Crane was on there. I was scared to death.
We were in the same room.
Okay. I was scared to death. And so I remember when I was done, I felt like I'd done well. I'd done a lot of prep, and I felt good about what I did. I had no clue if it was good enough. And at the end of it, Juge starts asking me questions. And these were the kind of questions that, like, did you make all that crap up, or do you really know self-storage? That was the kind of questions he was asking me. Like, he was testing me, Mm-hmm. Well, everything he asked me, luckily, like, I had at the tip of my tongue. So I was throwing out data and all this stuff. And so I got past that. Then they invited us to go to what was then called Charm School. It's about 4 or 5 days of instructor training, intense stuff. It is tough to get through, late nights working on presentations and stuff. And at the end of that process, they either take you and you become a workshop leader and you start instructing, or they cut you. And this is all on your dime. Like, all this travel, all this time, it's all on your dime. And so we had 20 that made it to instructor training, or what we used to call Charm School, out in Phoenix. And 20 got there, and they kept 10 and they cut 10. And I was fortunate to be in the 10 that they kept. But I remember thinking, man, if I get cut after this much time and effort, money and stress, and it's like, I'm going to be really upset with myself, really. But that was it. So that was 2019. I started, that might've been it was 2019. And I've been teaching since.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've always been impressed. My story is similar to yours. I sat down with Lydia Bennett and Todd Kuhlman teaching 101, going like, oh my God, these guys know everything. And then look at the 102 instructor. I mean, same thing. I was like, I hope I could be there. So my story was kind of similar to yours, on that one. And I always like pointing it out because so many people are like, oh, I want to be a CCM instructor. That's got to be easy. You just travel around, you just talk, and that's all it is. But I think when you look at the quality of education the CCM Institute puts out, a lot of it is because it's derived from the instructors. Even, when you and I taught in Austin not long ago, after we're done, it was like, all right, here's what you did right. Here's what you can improve on. Here's what you should do a little better next time. And here's where you gave wrong answers to the class, and don't do that again. And, I'm taking notes of the whole thing as I'm still doing the process. And, as I go back out the next time, I'm like, all right, Bo said to do X, Y, and Z. Let's go ahead and try this. And I watched it, some of it landed, some of it didn't land. But it's all been derived by the instructors to go out there and continually try to be better. And I think that's what makes the fact the material is great, but make it come alive and make students really understand it, I think is what makes those instructors great. And it's all self-derived. Those great instructors are great instructors because they push themselves to be great instructors.
You know what I really like about the culture of instructing at the Institute is it is absolutely a culture of excellence. And just like the military was for me, at least my experience. And so like good enough is not good enough. These students, and they're paying real money. They're taking 4 days, often traveling, more expense, hotel rooms. And man, they deserve to get the absolute best educational experience you can offer. Good enough is not good enough. It needs to be excellence. And the instructor cadre, man, it polices itself. Like if somebody goes up there and like phones it in, like somebody's going to talk to them about it, And we have, we just did it in Minneapolis. We have instructor training every year. We're always trying to get better. We're about, we're working on rewriting the 102 course again to make it better, to make it more relevant, to make it more modern. And I'm thrilled about that. Really excited about where that's going. But I love that the Institute doesn't just sit on its laurels with the education. And really, matter of fact, it's the most fun thing that I do in the business. I just love teaching. I love seeing those light bulbs come on. It's tremendously satisfying.
Right before this interview, I got tagged by one of the students from just last week. He was like, I passed. It's great. Thanks so much, Mark and Will. And you're just like, yes.
Oh, yeah. So, and like when you go to the meetings and the new designees get pinned, and like you get to see your students get the pin, earn the designation. I love those nights, and I'll hang out with my Kentucky folks, and then I'm going through the room trying to find my former students to congratulate them. Like it's such a moment for them, and it's so satisfying as an instructor to have the honor to play a part in their journey to earn the designation and becoming more successful. I mean, everything about that I love.
I agree. So what does the CCI Institute do for veterans, though, overall, outside of just the training?
Yeah, and I was actually unaware of any of this and don't think it existed, or if it did, I didn't know when I started my CCIM journey. But the CCIM Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of the Institute, when the foundation has a veteran scholarship, and that there's a lot of scholarships in the CCIM universe. Most chapters have named educational scholarships that are oftentimes $1,000, $1,500, and basically cover most of the cost of taking 101 or one of the other courses, and that's great. But what the CCIM Foundation is, they went out, they raised a bunch of money, and the veteran scholarship is up to $15,000, and it covers the cost of all 4 courses, the negotiations course, CCR. It covers travel. And so you can take somebody walking out of the military, they can apply for, earn this scholarship, and it covers the entire expense. And I'm on this foundation board, and I'm on the committee that awards these veteran scholarships because I'm a vet and I'm passionate about this. I love the fact that the CCIM Foundation does this, but it's great. And we have some students that'll get out of the military, they'll get the scholarship, they'll work through their courses, and they'll do great. And we have some that will win the scholarship and they'll take 101 and they won't do anything after that. We have some that decide they're going to get in the commercial real estate industry. They'll win the scholarship and they'll decide, and this is a bad move for me. Like, I don't belong here in commercial real estate. Totally fair, you know?
Yeah.
So there's some guardrails, like you have to be able to get through the curriculum in a certain amount of time and all that. But I'll tell you, for any of the veterans listening, if you're about to get out, or if you've gotten out and you're, still in the first handful of years in your career, you can apply for this scholarship. Even if you've taken some classes already, you can apply for your scholarship, and it'll cover the remainder of the expense of the courses and travel and all that stuff, and really help. I mean, what we're trying to do is give a hand up to the men and women who have served our country and sacrificed years of their life, and were willing to sacrifice their actual life in defense of our country. And as an institute, we want to honor that and help them in any way, give them the opportunity. Because look, I am not abnormal in commercial real estate in the sense that I'm in it because my family was in it. Okay, that's kind of what normal looks like in a lot of sense. Like, I'm generation 3. There's a lot of that in the industry. But like, how can we help people who have served our country that don't have those natural on-ramps into commercial real estate? And this is our solution to it. So if you're out there and you're interested in commercial real estate in any way, it doesn't have to be as a broker, but you want to earn your designation, you can go to CCIM, ccimfoundation.com. And like, applications are open right now. They close in January of 2026. The next round of winners will be awarded, I think, June of next year in 2026. So we just awarded the last batch. I think 7 received it. 7 or 8 received this scholarship about a month or 2 ago. But you can go to ccimfoundation.com, click on scholarships, and all the information you need is there to do it. And I would I almost beg you to apply. Like, we want to see your application. Like, I want to read about your story and be able to say, yes, man, we're going to help this person earn the designation and have success in commercial real estate.
And I think, for anybody that's on the fence, and I can say, at least for my journey, is that I was lucky enough to be working corporate real estate that paid for mine. But I mean, the joke is it's $5,000 a letter by the time you spend everything to earn it. And if you look at the value you get, for me, I was in corporate real estate. I earned my CCIM, and they're like, you know what? You understand the math? We have another position. We're going to go ahead and create a position for you and have you move up and start doing acquisitions and dispositions across North America. And I can even say, from the brokerage side of the stuff I was doing outside of my corporate role, I'm going up as a 28-year-old, 29-year-old with a few years of in the industry, competing against gray-headed guys who've been doing this forever. And I was getting beat every single time because, well, he's been doing it. He's got something. What I started noticing the moment I started putting the CCIM on there was I started getting more interviews. Now, I didn't win every one of them, but I started getting more interviews. I started getting to the table. And as I started getting to the table, I started winning more. And I could tell you that just the credibility along with that helped drastically on just winning business. And then when it came to referrals, when it came to those things, just the credibility that CCIM added to all that. I mean, I joke that, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for CCIM, for the education. I'll give Iram some credit too. I started there and then moved through with all that. But when it came to CCIM, I mean, absolutely was game changer for me in my career. And even the current role I'm in, that was part of the reason why they hired me to run the brokerage, was like, we saw you have a CCIM, so you know what you're doing, obviously. Let's bring you on in. I was like, well, that sweet. That was an easy interview. Absolute value. And if you could, earn it and get through everything, by all means. And I love what the foundation does, and we keep raising more money for the foundation to increase the number of scholarships.
Yep. The value of the designation for me was all those things that you mentioned, but it was a little bit different for me. Like, I was coming back to the only real commercial real estate firm, the only one that just did commercial real estate in the entire town. There were 2 designees in the entire town. It was my dad and my uncle. And so the credibility part, I kind of just inherited that. And then I came back to it. But for me, it was the extreme amount of confidence that the designation gave me. I believed once I got through those educational courses, I believed I knew what I was doing. I believed now that I was valuable and could really help somebody. And when I started stopped doubting myself and earned the designation and got that confidence, that's really when I started having a lot more success. And so, and most people getting out of the military, they're really good at what they do. They got great training, they've got integrity, they've got character, they got work ethic, they've got discipline, and they've had a tremendous amount of success. That's normal, okay? Then you find yourself in a situation when you're in a new environment where everybody around you has more experience and more knowledge than you do. And you can have a little bit of a crisis of confidence there. And man, for me, the CCIM education, earning the designation, just gave me a huge shot of confidence. And it was hugely impactful. And now I am one of those gray-haired guys. I was reapplying, because Vancouver, Fall Forum's in Vancouver this year, and my passport has expired. So I'm going through the process last week of renewing my passport. And you can renew it online. And so I had to submit an updated picture, but it's asking for things: age, height, weight, eye color, hair color. And my options are brown, black, blonde, gray, bald, So I asked my wife, I was like, I've still got some darkness on the top of my head, Should I go with brown or with gray? And she just smiled. She's like, oh, baby, no, gray is the right answer. I was like, dang it, I don't feel like I'm nearly 50, but I'm nearly 50. I've got gray hair to prove it.
Right. Oh, that's funny. So, if we're kind of wrapping everything up, knowing kind of what you've done in your career, kind of from what you know now, and while you're in the service, is there anything that you would have done differently, or wish maybe you didn't learn the lesson anywhere near as hard as you may have learned it the first time?
It's a good question. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. I certainly don't regret. I do not regret enlisting. It was a huge thing for me. It's helped me every day since. I've also not missed it one day since I've been out. But as far as lessons, thing about making mistakes or repeating the class is you learn it better. And anytime we go through anything, if we don't learn what we're supposed to learn, we get to repeat the course, same way as in school. If I don't learn to live graciously and lovingly with my wife and it causes conflict and I don't get through that conflict and I don't learn it, guess what? I get to have that argument with her again, you get to repeat the course. And so I generally don't think a lot in terms of, man, I wish I would have done this differently. But dude, as a 48-year-old, gray-haired guy now, if I could take all this knowledge and experience that I have now and go back and apply it when I was 20 years old, dude, no telling what that future would look like. It could also be a total train wreck. So, man, every failure I've had, every lesson I've learned, every class I've had to repeat has all played a part in helping shape me to where I am now. So I don't know that I would ever really change anything.
Okay, that's fair.
I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for.
No, that's fair. I mean, we always ask the question as we kind of wrap up to, as a veteran that's coming through, and it's like, man, I want to be Bo Barron one day. What is it that I could have done, or what was a mistake that Bo made that maybe I didn't have to make that same mistake?
I'll tell you one thing that I would do differently is I would enlist right out of high school instead of wasting those 4 years of college. However, those 4 years of college is when I was dating my wife and, friendships and a lot of relational maturity happened there. I'd probably be a completely different guy if my relational maturity happened in the Marine Corps versus at Murray State University. Who knows? Maybe I wouldn't like myself as much. or maybe I'd be way further on. I mean, it's like, who knows? But God's used all those things in my life to grow me into who I am now. And I don't know that I'd change any of that.
That's fair. Well, Bo, thank you so much for your time, so much for sharing your story and talking about CCIM and the things that it's done for you. Again, we usually get some questions in the comments. Hopefully, you're more than willing to jump in and answer some of those questions as we get
Sure.
them. Awesome. Well, thank you,
Absolutely,
Bo,
man.
so much. If you guys enjoyed this, feel free to give it a like, give us a subscribe, share it with a friend, and go from there. So, again, appreciate it. Thank you, Bo, and thank you all for listening.
Yeah, man. I'll see you in Vancouver and Miami.
That's right.